Welcome, viewers. Today we explore the fierce dawn of human justice in ancient Babylon. Before the laws, early cities were drowning in a vicious cycle of endless, dark revenge. Then, one visionary king carved a massive black stone that shifted the course of human history. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Was it pure savage cruelty or brilliant order? Step back in time to witness the shocking truth behind the legendary Code of Hammurabi. In the 18th century BC, nomadic tribes began to gather into massive urban centers. For the very first time, countless strangers were living together in tight, heavily crowded spaces. But this rapid expansion brought a dark problem to the streets of ancient Mesopotamia. There were no police forces, no formal courts, and absolutely no universal laws to guide them. When a simple dispute arose, like a stolen goat, there was only one fierce way to settle the score. People relied heavily on spontaneous, fierce retaliation to solve their daily conflicts. If a builder constructed a fragile house that collapsed, taking the life of a family member, the grieving father would not seek financial payment. He would demand immediate, dark vengeance. Entire angry families would grab their bronze weapons and launch fierce strikes against the builder's clan. This blind retaliation would trigger an endless cycle of tragedy between the rival clans. Lives lost upon the desert sand would demand more loss, tearing the fragile ancient society apart. The earliest cities were practically suffocating under the heavy weight of their own chaos. According to ancient records, the survival of human civilization was truly at stake. Imagine living in a world where your safety depends entirely on your family's physical might. Could you sleep peacefully at night, knowing that absolute, wild anarchy ruled the streets outside? To survive this era, humanity desperately needed something much stronger than a bronze sword. They needed an unseen force that could successfully control the darkest instincts of the human mind. Yet the situation became far more toxic, as strict social inequality began to quickly rise. Wealth and absolute power slowly started to gather in the greedy hands of a highly privileged few. A stark and terrifying contrast emerged between wealthy nobles and the struggling common workers. The elite noble class, the Awilu, lived in luxury and wore expensive, beautifully dyed clothes. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens and the wretched slaves suffered endlessly under the scorching sun. In this fractured realm, justice was completely twisted by the heavy weight of silver and gold. If a rich aristocrat ended a poor commoner's life, he rarely faced any serious punishment. He could simply toss a few silver shekels to the poor, grieving family and walk away quite free. However, the harsh reality was vastly different for those at the very bottom of the ladder. If a miserable slave even accidentally injured a nobleman, the consequences were tragic. The slave would be dragged into the public square and severely punished as a terrifying warning. There was no true standard of fairness, only arbitrary rulings from corrupt and greedy judges. These powerful officials would happily accept golden bribes to actively crush the totally innocent. The stifling desert heat was absolutely nothing compared to the burning resentment in their hearts. The dark seeds of a massive, fierce rebellion were quietly waiting to burn Babylon to the ashes. If you were a poor citizen watching this extreme injustice every single day, would you not rebel? The tension in the crowded, dusty markets was incredibly thick, ready to explode at any moment. King Hammurabi knew that his magnificent empire was standing on the absolute edge of collapse. He clearly knew that military force alone could never heal the deep wounds of a broken society. The king needed a brilliant solution to strip away the deadly power of personal revenge forever. He needed to transfer the sacred right of punishment from angry individuals strictly to the state. To achieve this task, Hammurabi executed a legendary political and mental masterstroke. He did not simply announce a list of arbitrary rules. He claimed direct divine inspiration. History reveals that he presented himself as the humble, chosen protector of the strictly oppressed. He proudly declared that the supreme sun god of justice, Shamash, had handed him the sacred law. This bold claim of divine authority made the new laws unquestionable to the religious masses. No mortal citizen, no matter how incredibly rich or powerful, would ever dare argue with the god. The core of this grand strategy was a tall black pillar made entirely of solid diorite stone. This massive, incredibly imposing monument was carefully placed right in the bustling city square. It was specifically designed to be publicly visible to every person passing through the market. Carved deeply into its dark surface were 282 strictly detailed regulations. These sharp cuneiform symbols sparkled menacingly under the harsh sunlight of the dry desert sky. They covered almost everything, from marriage contracts and trade wages to severe criminal actions. But the most revolutionary and chilling concept etched into the stone was known as Lex Talionis. This term translates directly to the infamous principle of proportionate and equal consequence. You know it by its terrifying name: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. To understand how this terrifying system functioned, let us examine a deeply tragic scenario. Imagine a hard-working builder who constructs a multi-story house for a very wealthy family. The builder lazily cuts corners, using weak mud bricks that cannot support the heavy ceiling beams. A few days later, disaster strikes. The unstable roof collapses in a massive cloud of red dust. The wealthy homeowner's innocent young son tragically perishes beneath the heavy pile of rubble. The grieving father is completely shattered, weeping wildly over the deeply tragic loss of his child. Before this rigid new law, the furious father would have gathered armed relatives to end the clan. Under Hammurabi's strict order, the father is forbidden from taking any fierce personal revenge. Instead, powerful state guards march directly into the builder's home, carrying out the strict sentence. The builder is not slain. The law demands perfect symmetry to truly balance the strict scales of justice. Because the homeowner's young son perished, the state must take the life of the builder's innocent son. The weeping teenage boy is dragged into the unforgiving sunlight, bound tightly with heavy, coarse ropes. The builder's agonizing screams echo through the stone square as the deeply tragic sentence finally falls. To modern sensibilities, this dark practice seems like the absolute peak of savage ancient barbarism. We look back at this dark spectacle with deep disgust, judging them by the moral standards of today. To grasp Hammurabi's genius, we must carefully look at this strict, harsh law through the ancient lens. Imagine an era where stealing simple bread could result in your beloved family's deeply tragic end. In that chaotic time, an eye for an eye was a massive, revolutionary leap forward for basic rights. For the very first time, the law placed a strict, unbreakable ceiling on fierce, dark retaliation. If someone took your eye, the law allowed you to take exactly one eye in return, and nothing more. You were strictly forbidden from ending his entire family or burning his farm completely to ashes. This structured system successfully stopped the deadly, endless blood feuds between the rival clans. Before this code, an eye could cost you your life, your children, and all your valuable possessions. The state firmly established a strict monopoly on violent forces to maintain total public order. A furious mob could no longer drag a suspect into the street and blindly end his life forever. Every accusation had to be brought before a judge in a proper, structured, ancient legal court. Solid evidence and sworn witnesses were strictly required before any severe punishment was dealt. This truly monumental shift created a highly structured society for the ancient Babylonians. We must also acknowledge the deeply troubling and unequal nature of this famous ancient law. The rigid code favored wealthy aristocrats over the struggling commoners and the miserable slaves. If a noble blinded another noble, he would inevitably lose his own precious eye in return. If that same noble blinded a common peasant, he merely had to pay a rather minor silver fine. And if a poor slave dared to strike a free man, the slave's ear would be tragically severed. Justice in Babylon was never blind. It was sharply divided by strict social class and wealth. Yet, despite these glaring flaws, the ancient code contained some surprisingly progressive elements. It established the revolutionary concept of minimum wage for various struggling laborers. It provided key protections for divorced women, allowing them to reclaim their rightful dowry. A farmer whose crops were destroyed by a devastating flood would be forgiven his massive debt. The state fully recognized that natural disasters were beyond human control and offered mercy. The most profound legal legacy of Hammurabi is the ancient concept of presumed innocence. The first rule on the stone pillar states that the accuser must definitively prove their bold claim. If a man charges another with a crime but fails to provide proof, the bold accuser will perish. This terrifying consequence ensured that people would think twice before telling a malicious lie. As the glorious empire expanded, this massive stone code traveled far across the ancient lands. Copies were meticulously carved onto clay tablets and distributed throughout the entire realm. It boldly proclaimed that the strong should never be allowed to oppress the weak and vulnerable. Hammurabi wanted to be remembered forever as a righteous king who delivered true justice. His legacy reveals a profound truth about the dark nature of early human society. We like to deeply believe that laws are created strictly from a place of moral righteousness. But history clearly shows that our very earliest laws were simply practical tools of survival. They were extremely harsh, desperate measures designed to stop us from destroying each other. The terrifying black stone pillar firmly represented an unbreakable early social contract. Citizens surrendered their freedom and their natural urge for dark, fierce, personal vengeance. In exchange, the ancient state promised them a heavily regulated and highly predictable life. The sheer brutality of the punishments served as the ultimate deterrent for violent crime. When you know that breaking a man's bone will result in your own bone being strictly broken too, you will surely think carefully before lifting your angry hand against your annoying neighbor. He did not invent human cruelty. He simply harnessed it to build an orderly society. He took the wild, unpredictable beast of revenge and locked it securely inside an iron cage. That heavy iron cage was the absolute authority of the newly formed royal government. This magnificent stele survived the collapse of the ancient Babylonian Empire itself. It was buried beneath the desert sands for thousands of years, completely hidden from the world. Archaeologists finally unearthed the stone in 1901 during a large excavation. Today, this truly incredible artifact stands silently inside the famous Louvre Museum. It serves as a deeply dark reminder of humanity's fierce path toward modern civilization. We look at the ancient laws and naturally feel a profound sense of moral superiority. Modern legal systems are built firmly on rehabilitation and universal human rights. We proudly declare that justice should never be cruel, violent, or unusually punishing. But without the strict, terrifying foundation laid by Hammurabi in the scorching desert sun. Our modern concepts of fairness and equality would simply never have existed at all. He bravely took the very first agonizing steps out of the dark, chaotic tribal anarchy. The ancient law of retaliation was the incredibly harsh medicine that cured the world. It forcefully taught humanity that actions have severe and permanent legal consequences. As we stand comfortably in the present, protected by complex constitutions and fair juries, we must pause and acknowledge the unyielding stone that first supported the scales of justice. The ghost of Babylon still whispers through the marble halls of every supreme courtroom today, reminding us that true order is a delicate thing, built upon a foundation of sacrifice. The black diorite stele remains the ultimate symbol of humanity's early awakening. A truly terrifying but necessary chapter in the fascinating story of our survival. Hammurabi's code used strict forces to build a lasting peace. Did the ends justify the means? Was he a ruthless dictator, or the true savior of civilization? Leave your thoughts below. If you enjoyed this journey, please like, share, and subscribe for more epic historical tales.